I'm good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the ding stylings of Mr. Doug Proper.
Welcome, everybody. We are talking about dings today, which is, I think this is the first official dings version of Ding King. I don't know if we've ever actually done dings yet, but
No dings.
no dings. This is the first dings edition.
Ted was always on me about it, and I was just like, no.
Well, it's one of those things that when we decided this was the topic, I actually had a hard time figuring out how to prepare for this, because it's one of those things that we all have to deal with at one point or another with a custom guitar, that it's hard to demonstrate in such a way that is demonstrable in a short thing like a Ding Kings meeting. And it's also something that it's hard to, because there is no single way of doing it. If you're going to do a topic like the epoxy putty fill for a hole in the guitar, that's fairly specific, and you know exactly what you're going to be dealing with. With dings, it's different every time. It's different every guitar. It could be a different spot on every guitar. It could be a different guitar. It could be a different finish you're dealing with. It could be so for me, the difficulty with coming up with a way to demonstrate it was, well, it's not very specific, because every time you deal with having to fix a ding or a scratch or a gouge or a little accident on the guitar, it's different every time. And therein lies the challenge, because fixing them is a different approach almost every time. You can have a bunch of different ways that you handle it, but every time you approach something, it could come out different. It could need to try, start it a certain way, and then maybe you change your course. Sometimes they take several days to do. Sometimes they take 10 minutes. Sometimes they take 2 weeks. Depends on what you're up against. So that was my first thought, was how to go about approaching a subject like this. So for me, before we start actually looking at guitars, what I wanted to talk about is just dings in general, and how to deal with them from the customer side. Obviously, the thing you want to avoid while you have somebody else's personal property in your care is not dinging it yourself, so you have to repair it before you give the guitar back to the customer. So you're taking great pains to make sure that nothing happens to a guitar while it's in your care. But stuff happens. You've heard me say, 1,000 times before, that we spend our lives hovering over other people's property with sharp objects in our hands. Something sooner or later is going to happen that you're going to have to contend with, that during the course of a repair, you make it look worse before you get it to make it look better. Outside of, accidents that can happen in the shop all the time. I think that the most stressful day for any repair person is when somebody shows up at the front counter, flops open their case, and there's a $20,000 guitar that's pristine that they're dropping off, that they just bought, and now you have to spend the whole time it's in your shop handling it with white gloves, and you're trying to keep from making the slightest scratch on a guitar. The happiest day when somebody shows up in the shop is with a guitar case that they flop open, and it's a Fender Custom Shop Heavy Relic, and that's the most relaxed day you could possibly have. But what I found, what I like to talk about first when it comes to fixing these, is dealing with customer requests for fixing things. And I think, Ian, you do a lot of this because you're known as the finishing guy. That somebody has an accident with a guitar, they bring it in, and I think managing customer expectations when you're fixing chips, dings, scratches, gouges, and all of that stuff is paramount to start with. I have a few ways that I try to handle it from a customer perspective. When a customer brings in a guitar, lays it on the front counter, and points to the guitar and says, "Can you make this go away?" Or the other phrase that they'll commonly say when they point to wherever the problem is on the guitar is, "Can you take this out?" And my two responses to that are, when they say, "Can you make this go away?" or "Can you take this out?" is the same. My response to them is, "Well, you already have. I have to put something back." And there's no such thing as very few circumstances where the phrase, "it'll buff right out," ever ends well. I don't know where that phrase came from, but I think customers have a tendency to use that phrase a whole lot more than Lutz do. So right off the bat, expressing the notion to a customer that you've already taken out what's there, I have to figure out a way to do it, to put it back or put something in its place that is inconspicuous at best. If you get super lucky, not noticeable. And if, all of the stars are aligned, are completely imperceptible or quote unquote invisible. Doing this kind of a repair very often is an exercise in camouflage more than it is in actual repair. There are some circumstances where in a manufacturer, the repair department will take a guitar in that has a ding in it, and they'll strip down the entire top or the entire back or sides and then repaint the whole thing. And that's a way you could, in theory, get rid of what was there and quote unquote make it disappear. But that's not practical from the standpoint of a repair shop. The notion that you're managing customer expectations from the get-go is very important, that that they understand that it's not easy work. Very often you'll have customers point to a part on the guitar and say, "You can get rid of that, can't you? That'll be no problem for you." It's always a problem. It's always a pain. And there's always a hassle factor because the expectations of the customer have to be lowered while you're doing your repairs. My way of dealing with that, like I said, has always been a little bit of humor at the front counter, letting them know that it's not a simple fix. The other way I deal with it, plus quite frankly, there are some times that dings and dents and scratches shouldn't be repaired. I don't classify those as letting the customer determine whether they want it repaired, or even the guitar necessarily. I don't live in the world of whether the particular type of guitar is sacred enough to not have a ding fixed. If it's objectionable to the customer, they want it done, that's fine, we'll deal with it appropriately. But the second way I deal with it is through price. I have a shop labor rate, and when somebody comes in with a ding or a scratch, or the case came down on the face of the guitar, or they bumped against the coffee table, or the bass player was getting adventurous in the middle of the tune and his headstock went swinging around near the owner's guitar, I'll say, "Well, that's fine. We can address that. We can make it look as good as possible. I can't promise that anything's going to disappear. We'll make it look as good and as inconspicuous as we can." However, I'll point to, if I have just an example, I'll point to a chip or a ding in somebody's guitar that they'll ask me if I can get rid of. Let's say that was it. and I'll point to it and I'll say, outside of Manhattan, this is the most expensive real estate you'll come across. Partially because it's a very, very small area. Everybody's perception is that it's tiny. You can make that go away. My response usually is that phrase right there. I'll point to it and I'll say, that's the most expensive real estate this side of Manhattan, because it takes time, experience, and expertise. And that always comes at a premium. My shop labor rate currently is $140 an hour. When somebody asks me to touch their guitar up, make a dent go away, a ding go away, or something like that, I double it. And that immediately puts it in perspective for the customer that this is prized real estate. I'm going to take my time, and that's my shop labor rate for as long as it takes me. To help work with a customer's budget, I'll tell him or her that we can put a cap on, on it to make it manageable. If you want to keep it under 3 hours or under 5 hours or whatever, I'll tell you if I expect that to be reasonable for a particular damage to a guitar. But for me to spend an hour setting up a guitar, a couple of 3 hours doing a level and a crown, or 6 hours doing a refret is one thing. For me to meet your expectations for how you want some damage to the finish of your guitar to go away is another thing entirely. And that's why I charge what I do for it. You would be surprised. Go ahead.
Do you have an instinct of, like, for instance, what that chip would run a person if they brought that in? Would that be like $600-700 or something for you to?
Yeah, so something
that?
like that. If I'm dealing with color, that always, so I'll look at something like that and I'll say, for me to make that meet a customer's expectations, we're probably looking at anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4, for something like that.
Is this something that you would qualify as a ding? Like, I guess we really didn't think about the parameters too much, but
Well, yeah, I mean, like that's what I said before.
Yeah.
Dings, scratches, dents, chips,
Yeah.
scrapes, gouges, they
Yeah.
kind of all fall under dings.
that isn't like a wood wound or anything like that. There's no wood replacement. It's just purely
Yeah,
it
just
took a hit.
there's finish missing.
Yeah. All right.
Now, most of the time we're dealing with, a little dent in the top of a spruce top or something like that, or the side of a guitar. We're not looking at, that's something. Usually, when I'm estimating time, if there's color involved, I'll double what I think it's going to take me. So if it's like an hour and there's color involved, I'll tell the customer that it's a minimum of 2 hours. If it's 2 hours, if I think it's like a 2 hour type of thing, especially where somebody comes in and they've got several dings throughout the top of, say, an old Martin, and they want it to go away, want them to go away, I'll think about how much time I have in it. And after doing this for a period of time, you get a feel for what's going to be, an hour, what's going to be 3 hours, what's going to be 4 or 5 hours, of attention and detail, and how crazy you are with getting into matching colors or painting and grain lines and stuff like that. But that's usually when you're dealing with some kind of repair. But to manage expectations, that's how I start. So right off the bat, if I'm going to be spending an hour fixing it, and I don't bill any ding out at less than an hour. It's by the time you get all your materials out, by the time you mix up what you're going to mix, by the time you lay it on the guitar, and then after you wait for it to dry and you come back. I'm talking about bench time. Scraping, sanding, polishing, buffing, going back and reapplying, and there's nothing that you could do to me, in my estimation, that would be less than an hour. There is no such thing as a 15-minute ding repair, even if I'm using CA. It might dry a whole lot quicker, and I might not have to reapply many times because it's not lacquer. but you're into an hour, and then you have cleanup time after that. So, for me, the minimum's an hour. So suddenly, if I'm billing out at 140 an hour, and I double it for my finish repairs at $280 for the first hour, even if it's only an hour, that suddenly brings it into sharp relief for the customer. Because then the customer will look at the guitar and go, I'm not spending $300 on that piece of real estate. That's expensive real estate. That's fine by me.
Yeah.
Then I don't have to do the job, and I don't have to worry about it. I can just put frets in that guitar, which is why they brought it in the first place.
Do you have like, I found, like it was really tempting for me for a long time to kind of like, like on Instagram, we all take, like I took a lot of pictures of touch up from really good angles. And now I find I look for the kind of the bad angles because,
Yeah.
it's still pretty good, but I really want to be upfront with the customer and say, manage those expectations up front. Do you keep a portfolio of kind of like common repairs that you've done that you can show them and say, look, this is kind of how this is going to turn out for $300? Or do you think that there's still expectations? Like if I paid $300 for a ding repair, I'd be, probably have a lot of expectations. I don't know.
Yeah, you do have to manage expectations. I don't really keep a portfolio of that. I can pull out my phone and look for some pictures of recent things. There at times are, a few things throughout the shop that I can point to, at most times. The easiest way to deal with that for me is I just keep a can of naphtha at the front counter, and I just pour it on their guitar. Naphtha to me, once it hits wood, will act very much like thinned lacquer. So then, once it gets wet, well, here. So if we're looking at, I don't know if you can see that. This is maybe not a good example, but if you can't see, we probably should switch to the other camera for this. Can you pin the other thing?
Yeah, one sec. Badoo. There we go.
There we are. So if we're looking at, let's say it's that, okay?
Yeah.
Keeping naphtha nearby and just pouring it over there, that
Looks
immediately
looks pretty dark.
It looks pretty dark, and that gives the customer an immediate appreciation of what happens when things get wet.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily promising the customer that that's what it's going to look like. I'll take great pains to try to keep it as light as I can and keep it in relationship with the surrounding guitar. But anytime wood is going to get wet, it's going to get dark.
Yeah. Which really like, it raises the question, does this scratch look better unattended to or attended to, like.
Very true. Very true. And we can come back to the front camera.
Okay.
So, there's an example of just a quick way of putting it into perspective for a customer. Most of the time, I can explain to them that, it probably won't be that dark depending on what material I use, but to give them an idea of what transpires. As soon as the guitar gets wet, it's going to get dark. Then we have to manage with the color. Then we have to manage with, the saturation or the consistency of whatever material we choose to put on the guitar. Sometimes that's based on what the finish is of the guitar. Sometimes it's based on what we're trying to achieve. If we're trying to get something lighter, maybe we have to use a different material to protect the wood from whatever we're putting on there. And then suddenly the conversation, you see the customer's head going up and down going, okay, so for me to come in here, point to it and say, can you take that out, was a really dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
And that's why that conversation has to take place there. That's managing expectations. So then the customer can work it out in their head to determine whether or not that's and important enough real estate to spend that kind of money on. Well, I guess I can live with it. Just a couple of quick anecdotes. I have a guitar which Dale Unger built for me. 95-ish, he built this guitar for me. It was just when he left Benedetto, and he created a short series of guitars that he called the Benedetto Tribute. Well, it's like a $16,000 guitar. And I was on the bandstand one night playing a gig with a bass player by the name of Lynn Christie, who is an incredible bass player. He plays a piccolo bass instead of a full upright bass. His bow work is mesmerizing. So we were playing a gig, playing a tune, and I nodded to him to start to, play whatever tune we were playing and take a solo, and he launches into this incredible solo that lasted a fair amount of time, and it was one of those performances where the entire room went dead silent and everybody's attention was at the bandstand. And he finishes it going all the way up the bass, the big flurry, and winds up with this big stroke with his bow, and he did the whole solo on a bow. He's this big finish, and the bow comes across the face of my guitar, and boom, right into the face of my guitar, right below right above the bottom F hole. And he nailed it really good. And everybody in the audience went, and I just kind of looked over and I'm like, thanks, dude.
Was it in time? Did the pop happen in time, or?
It was hard enough to move me,
Yeah.
to push me sideways. And it left about a little gouge in the face of the guitar, probably about that long. It's still there to this day.
Yeah.
I could fix it. And other than, the cobbler's kids having those shoes, I chose to leave it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't bother me that much. Doesn't affect
Not only
me.
that, but it reminds you of maybe a nice time in your life, like.
Well, it'll also remind me never to hire Lynn on basic.
Yeah. All right. A lot of lessons in that scratch.
So, so it for me, it was never worth repairing because the guitar wasn't at risk for it. And like I said, pricing your ding repairs that way do two things. It puts the customer's expectations and understanding of it in relief. And two, it gives you the luxury of time that you get paid for to be able to take the time to make it just right. You know what I'm saying? To spend that extra time making it look good, do your practicing and stuff like that. Outside of that, I also think if you're going to provide that as a service to a customer, that practicing has to take place.
Yeah.
It's something you have to routinely do. I used to practice it a lot when a customer would ask me to perform that kind of a repair. I would find a crash dummy and try to replicate the damage on that guitar and then try to fix it first, try a bunch of different ways, try a bunch of different techniques, try a bunch of different materials until I'm satisfied with how I'm going to approach a given repair. And then I'll go to the customer guitar. So if I'm charging 4 hours for it, I might even spend two of those hours working on a crash dummy, and then only 2 hours working on a customer's guitar. But I got paid for all 4 hours. That's one of the reasons why I charge double my bench rate to do that work. There's a lot of expectations on the customer tied to it. It takes a whole lot more time than people will give it credit to do. And, I want to be able to take my time to be able to produce a result that at least lives up to the customer's expectations and leaves them with a good feeling when they pick up the guitar. My favorite experience is when that customer comes and they come to pick up their instrument and they're looking at the guitar, and they'll come to pick up the guitar and go, wow, I can't even see where that ding was. It looks great. And I'll say, Robert, it's over here. That's where it was, if you remember. That's the ding that we took care of. And, that's the experience I'm looking for to make something inconspicuous enough so the customers that can't even remember necessarily where it was. The second anecdote I think I'll give you in to illustrate the point is probably I'm thinking in the 90s, late 90s, 96, 97, somewhere in there. I had a customer from up in Connecticut, guitar player. He was he was also a setup guy. He worked for a music store doing setups and repairs and hot rods and, pickup changes and that kind of thing. And he had, as a player, he saved up and he purchased what at the time was probably close to the most expensive Fender custom shop piece you could get at the time. I think it was about $5,000 for a guitar, which was absurd for the middle 90s. And so he bought this guitar and he gigged with it, played out with it, and put some kind of ding in the face. If I remember correctly, it was some kind of sunburst. We were pals, we knew each other. Called me up, says, I got a guitar I want to bring you. And brought me the guitar. We had all of the conversations that we just had about it. He decided to leave it with me because this was his pride and joy. He just spent so much time saving up for this, and within 2 weeks of owning the guitar, he has this ding in the face. So he left the guitar with me. I told him, do not bug me. I have no idea how long it's going to take. When it's done, it's done. I don't rush finishing room repairs, period.
Doug, just to clarify, this was a sunburst instrument?
I think so, yeah.
And was the ding in a transition, or was it?
I don't remember exactly where it was. It was in the face. It was probably in the reddish part of the transition. So it was going to take color, and we discussed that, and so forth and so such. And so in whatever period of time, probably a couple of 3 months that I had the guitar, he decided he missed it too much, and he bought another one. And so when he showed up, and it was a different finish, but he showed up to pick up the sunburst, and it was I don't remember what the finish of the second guitar was, but it wasn't a burst. It was a solid color. But he brought that, and he checked out the guitar I fixed for him, loved it, paid me, and he says, while I'm here, he says, I need you to take a look at something. Pulls out the guitar, and he flips it around, and he shows me this huge ding on the side of the neck. And he says, can you do something about this? I said, yeah, I guess I can do something about that. And we had kind of the same conversation about the other one, and I could, deal with it in the best way I can deal with it. And he left it with me, took it away. And then whatever number of weeks or months later, he shows up to pick up that guitar. Great work, loves it, can hardly see it, pays me my money, and then he pulls out the first one. And he shows me this chip that came out of the headstock. And we spent the better part of 5 years, every few months, trading guitars.
Yeah.
Pick one up and drop the other one off. Because he would smack it against something, drop it, whatever happened, and the dings kept showing up at different parts of the guitar. But probably about 5 years later, I'm in the shop one day. I had just finished with a customer. They walked out. I was finishing what I was doing at the front counter, and I hear the chime for the door open, and Alf comes walking in the door, and I just put my hand up like this because he had a Strat case in his hand. I said, stop. He says, well, I'm here to pick up. I said, I know, but that's in your hand. He says, well, I got to tell you. So I said, we're done. We're finished. And he says, why? I said, what's going on? He says, what's the matter? I said, I don't want to keep doing this. With the amount of money you have spent these two guitars, you could have bought a third, locked the case, slid it under your bed, and you would have your pristine guitar for as long as you like.
Yeah.
So I said to him, I said, we're finished doing this. You gotta learn how to live with using a guitar. You can't You can't worry
How
about
did he receive that information?
he he didn't like to hear it at first. We talked about it for a few more minutes.
Uh,
Then he took the guitar home, and then a few years later, when we were dealing with each other on some other issue, he says, "You know what?" He says, "I that because I think the guitar he was bringing back at that point, um, he it was on the back of the peg head next to the tuners. There was a I don't know if there was a ding or if there was something that poked a little hole in there or something like that." And I said, "Well, what'd you do?" He says, "I put a little sticker of a frog over it."
hmm
I said, "Okay, if
There you go.
that means something to you, that's fine." So it's the kind of thing where you do have to deal with it with customers
Yeah.
to make sure that they realize that sometimes it's just not worth pursuing. Um, but with that part of the conversation, I want to bring in Justin, because he has as we're talking about customer expectations, I want to bring in Justin. Um,
Please.
where are you, Justin?
I'm right here. Can you hear me or see me?
Yeah. Do you want me to here? Let me do a split screen really quick.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. This is being a oh man, what's going on here?
You got us there?
Okay, there we go.
How are you, Justin?
Hey, Doug. I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. So when you heard we were going to be talking about dings, you contacted me and wanted to talk about a ding.
Yeah.
So this is it.
Yeah.
Is this a customer's guitar?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's one like you said. It's not $20,000, but it's perfectly clean. There's no scratches on it.
Right.
Well, there wasn't.
There wasn't. So what did it
Yeah.
come in for? Did it come in for this, or did it come in for something else, and then a side conversation took place?
So it came in just for a setup, and that was easy. And then I put it back in the case, and I noticed some crap on it, and I decided to wipe it down. And just for some stupid reason, my thumbnail caught it. So the scratch was me. So
Oh,
I guess I'll
okay.
come clean on that. Yeah, when I said somebody stupid scratched it, that somebody stupid was myself. But
I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. So that's the deal. But I did the damn thing, and it's super light, but it is super clean.
Yeah.
And I've never had anything like that happen before. You know, especially on a tailor. It seems like they're usually more forgiving than that. But yeah, just some little stupid thing happened. So
Okay. So
yeah, so I didn't talk to the customer yet about it, but even if it comes out clean, I'm still going to tell them, hey, this happened. I fixed it here. Here it is. That way they don't see it someday and then wonder.
yeah, I think that's always the best way to handle it. You know, you arm yourself with as much information first, figure out your way
Yeah.
forward, and have that conversation with the customer. So I don't know if I can share screen with this, because I'm going to want Ian's input on this as well.
Go ahead and try to share screen. Well, I think it'll nuke the side by side, but that's fine.
Here we go. Can you see
And
that?
yeah, you should be able to. Oh, next to the wing.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it looks like you were.
Can you pinch to zoom or zoom in? There should be a zoom in there somewhere.
There we go.
There we go. All right. Oh, you got lucky, Haas.
Lucky.
Well, I mean, comparatively, you should see some of the stuff I've done. I don't know. You know, I tell people I'm good at touch up because I suck at everything else. So,
Here's another view.
Nice.
but you didn't break the through to the wood. It doesn't look like. Do you have any actually fractured lacquer there?
No, none at all. That's why I was thinking I couldn't
Okay.
steam it out because
No, there's nothing to steam there, and in my estimation, that you wouldn't get anywhere there. One thing that gives me pause about this though is see the late wood lines there, how pronounced they are.
Yep.
That looks like some really thin finish. And so, Doug, you worked on a Collins recently where they told you that they respray the top to do bridge reglues, right?
Yes, I had an experience where I had a customer come in with a Collings, and it was for a crack repair, so we were already working on the finish to some degree because we were dealing with a crack in the face. So I glued the crack, cleated it, gave myself a nice thin line of lacquer on the face to seal it up. I always like to make sure that every crack is sealed so that it at least protects it from the elements from the outside and doesn't want to move as much. And I scraped it flush, started sanding, and within a couple of strokes, I burned right through the finish.
Uh-huh.
I was like, son of a bitch. So I picked up the phone, I called Collins, they put me through to, at their time, was a guy by the name of Steven, who was their finishing guy, or the head of their finishing department. And he got on the phone with me, was nice as could possibly be, explained to him what happened, and I said, as soon as I started sanding, I went through the finish. He said, what grit did you start with? I said, I started with 1,000 grit. He went, oh my God, I would never start with anything that aggressive.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, what?
Thousand grit sandpaper, too aggressive. All right.
Yeah, so what do you guys do down there?
Using notebook paper.
Yeah. He says, I said, how do you deal with it there? He says, here, he said, if we have a crack like that, he says, we would pop the bridge, take off the fingerboard and, either tape off the fingerboard or take the neck off and take off the pickguard and respray the face after the crack was.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
I'm like, it's a 3-inch crack. Why would I want to do a neck reset, bridge reglue and removal and reglue and replace the pickguard just to repair a crack?
Yeah.
So I found that unusual that in that case at that time that was their prescription. So the only difficulty here that I'm seeing is that it's right next to the bridge.
Yeah.
Which makes for sanding and scraping a little bit of difficulty because you really can't finish your stroke. We got some techniques today that'll probably help you in terms of being able to.
Yeah.
I
would just add to that finish looks thin, and you're gonna have to be very, very careful. So should we just do competing? You want to do competing ideas on repairing on this?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would probably drop fill, and I would probably drop fill with lacquer. Would anybody know what? So is this modern? What is Taylor using on these now? They've got
this is the UV.
This is modern.
Yeah, boy, I would maybe talk to Trevor Healy. He's having really he was talking about his waterborne finishes being downright miraculous for drop fills. I would maybe talk to him about that, but I would probably drop fill it since it's UV. I'd probably use like fill and finish, and then I would probably level with the that plexiglass trick where you put the sandpaper on the plexiglass and then make outriggers. Justin, are you familiar with that one? Have you seen me ballyhooing that?
I have
that technique.
Yeah. So
like
you use the thin film finish and then the accelerator, and then probably just one application would fill those since they're small.
Yeah. So I mean, ideally, you would on something like this, you would get a shot to like spray some kind of clear coat over the top of that. I've been having really good luck with Mohawk Ultraflow or Ultrabond Ultraflow, and like laying it out with an airbrush, like very, very subtly, you can get to like almost like a very close to a no buff finish. but you kind of hosed on layer lines on this, whether or not you go small with the just put the fill and finish in and level it out and buff that up. There's straight up going to be a line between the fill and the parent material there. So going back to the customer expectation thing too, I might call the customer right now. You could wind up putting a lot of time and energy into this, hoping for a miracle. Just as a for instance, I don't know what your kind of emotional makeup is on this kind of stuff, but I tend to have a hard time working in these situations where I'm hoping for a miracle where I can avoid having an uncomfortable conversation. It winds up putting my own personal expectations way too high, and I wind up blowing past. Frequently, I've blown past very, very serviceable repairs, hoping for a miracle, and really dug myself some pretty pretty terrible holes, to be honest with you. So depending on the customer, this might be the type of thing where you like, boy, the number of people that I say call the customer first, and they go, hey, you know what, he didn't even care, and he paid me my full price on the repair. Sometimes you get lucky with that. Sometimes you get like, yeah, go ahead and give it a whirl. I think like just from the customer position of having all of the options available to them at the outset, like personally, I would like to know that this happened and be able to pass on a repair if I was to know that, maybe there would be a witness line, or maybe, some things would happen and, there's risk involved. Like if the finish is thin and it could potentially get away from you, like knowing that those risk variables are out there, I feel like even offloads some of the responsibility for this. But it just the other thing too is you're just not going to get through a career, or at least I don't know anybody that's gotten through a career without a few of these things happening. So
they're always going to happen.
So I would just like, try to dial back the feelings of failure and all that kind of stuff, and just go, there's a batting average here, like, and it sounds like your batting average is high. So if you have to call a customer and go, hey, look, a scratch happened, and once again, this is not the worst I've ever seen. So I got some stories I'll tell you in private of things that I've seen and things that I've done that'll make you feel a lot better about this. So
we've all had things that have happened. I think calling the customer before you an attempt to repair is probably the best part of valor there.
Difficult to do.
It's difficult to do. I've been on both sides of those from time to time throughout different parts of our career. And when it works out fine, it works out fine. When it doesn't, it doesn't. I think most people have a good reaction to those things if you tell them beforehand, before the attempt to repair. I personally think for most people that speaks well to them of you, in the sense that regardless of the customer's reaction, some people may look at that and go, oh, it's no big deal, that's fine, I can live with that, don't worry about it, I'm not and worst case scenario there is you give away a free setup as a way of saying thank you for not being a dick. Other people might completely freak out. That's always a roll of the dice. You handle it with some humility and some, you don't need to be obsequious, but you need to say, hey, look, I had a little scratch happen on the guitar. I'd like you to come and look at it, or I can send you pictures, and we can talk about the way forward. That I think is paramount to being able to have a good customer reaction. I will just to go into a cul-de-sac. I also think it's as part of the discussion, it's paramount to have insurance when you run a shop. Heritage Insurance is a great outfit. There are other ones. Clarion is another one, and there are a few other insurance companies that have music store policies. But that at least gives me the comfort of knowing that when I'm approaching a customer about a problem, that I have everything in my arsenal, from I can fix it for you to even I know somebody who can fix it for us, or I can even go as far as buying the guitar from you.
Yeah.
And all of that within my field of options to be able to tell the customer, you know, there's a way to make you whole without making you feel like you've been, you know, taken advantage of in some sense. Fixing it first, and like Ian said, hoping for that miracle where you can say to the customer, oh, we had a damage take place to your guitar, but you'll never find it, is a gamble. Because if you have an issue where it is visible to somebody, then you're going to the customer after the fact saying, I was hoping not to be able to tell you about this, but now that it's visible, I have to. And that's the projection of that,
Yeah.
that a customer will always hear, instead of saying, well, you know, I tried to take care of it first and I planned on telling you, but I wanted to see how it came out first, is never a good position to start that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Very difficult. Yeah.
Now, if you want just a few seconds, a few minutes of me telling you how I go about this, not to I would try to approach this without spraying, personally, if we're in my shop. Me looking at this picture, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different drop fills. I would try to approach it from that standpoint. You can get in there with a fine enough material or a needle, like a sewing needle, or a plastic toothpick or something like that, trying to get a very small amount of finish at the bottom of those cups, to be able to, and I probably use fill and finish. I might use Star Bond. It's a little thinner. Fill and finish, you can thin it out a little bit if you wanted to mix it with Star Bond. I find fill and finish to be really good because it's got butyl in it, which allows it to flow out a little bit more before it activates. But if I get it just right to be at the bottom of that cup and hit it with a little bit of accelerator from far enough away, that I can get the repair to be sitting at the bottom of that cup with let me see if I can demonstrate it. And I do this periodically. I do it a lot in a lot of circumstances where I'm surprised almost every time how often I can get away with it if I'm careful. And it takes a little bit of practice, but if I'm here looking at, the surface where I let me try to draw a straight line.
Really quick, I wanted to read Brian Paris's thing.
Yeah.
I totally bought a customer a brand new D18 because my tech drilled a strap button hole in the wrong side. He got a brand new guitar. I sold his after repairing. Dealer gave me a great deal, so I only lost a little bit. And on a brand new Taylor, boy, that sounds really tempting. Should also say that I've never once confidently put a strap button on a guitar. So
that's true. Yeah, that's always one of these guesses that you have to make. So if there's your surface that you put a ding in of sorts, if that's the surface I'm looking for, if you're going lacquer, I try to fill it up where it's there and try to get it after a few applications to sit as close to the remaining surface as possible, so that when I come back and do my scraping or sanding, I'm doing as little abrasion to the top as possible. I found with fill and finish, especially if you use your, and shout out to Extra Crispy for turning me on to the glue looper. I think it was Extra Crispy. It could have been Danny West, but that glue looper thing I found to be a wonderful tool for getting the most finite amount of CA in the right spot. And if I'm trying to just fill that well, as opposed to pile on a bunch of finish that then later I scrape down, later I sand down the whole area, I can get away with a very small amount of abrasion to the top, where I can start at a super fine grit so I'm not putting deep scratches in, and then with a few techniques we can, get it to the point where we're getting it to a buffing wheel and without having to take too much material off the top. Tailor finishes aren't as thin as they look. Takes a little bit of work to get through to raw wood. So, you've got a little bit of forgiveness there. If you're looking at, I guess we'll do this in a different order. How much time do you have, Justin? You said you had to jump away?
Looks like his camera went off. I'm not sure if.
He may have already. He may have already disappeared. He said he was going to be able to be here for the first hour. It looks like he's already gone. All right, so we can move on to the rest of.
I'm still here, guys.
Oh, there you are.
I'm just fumbling with my phone. I'm walking out the door, but I'm going to take the phone with me so I can listen.
Oh, okay.
So I appreciate your time.
So, one of the, since we're talking about, if you want to spotlight the other camera there, Ian. One of my favorite techniques for dealing with a fill, and let's start with this. So,
What kind of guitar is this, Doug?
oh, this is a crash dummy. This is an Alvarez something or other. And it's got a poly finish, which is not that far away from what Taylor has. We're going to talk general principles in terms of that stuff before we get. So we've got a very slight ding here. It's got some relief to it. It's got a little bit of a cavity to it. It's in this case, we're probably missing a little bit of finish. I've already scraped it. If I'm dealing with a deep finish that I'm not sure what kind of adhesion that I have, I'll do a little bit of scraping. In Justin's case, I don't think he should, because he's trying to get away with as little evidence of messing around with the finish as possible. Plus, he's a lot closer to the bridge here than this particular ding is. But your choices typically for this would be your fill and finish. I don't know if that's in the camera or not. Here we go. Your fill and finish. I like, as an alternative for very small stuff, this stuff here. It's zoomed in a bit. But Starbond's super fast thin because you can put it on in very small increments. I don't know how far we can pinch up on that thing. I think it's probably. I saw a question flashed by the screen.
Yeah, I'm looking at. Doug, how do you clean up oxidation on old dings and spruce?
You mean on when spruce has darkened around the ding? You mean, or oxidation at the bottom of the missing wood?
Yeah, I think you might, like, there's oxidation. Like if a ding was like open for a long time, it might have a suntan that's dissimilar from the rest of it. But there's a lot of dirt and stuff like that in a lot of old dings.
I'll usually try to. I've got some examples of that on this Martin over here that we can
Okay,
look.
cool.
If it's darkened, turn gray. I've got a couple of really dark ones here that have a lot of dirt and or oxidation in it that I can show you on the Martin.
Here's a tip on when you ding a vintage guitar, which is just to rub dirt in it.
So
back when I would have a dip every once in a while, I'd rub some dip in it.
In this case, I'm going to open up. I'm going to grab a little bit of. I'm going to put some CA in a cup. There we go. In a cup.
Should I dual monitor you here?
Yeah, maybe. So I can go over to the camera and do this.
Yeah.
I just put a little in a cup. I never try to squeeze super glue out of a bottle.
Onto a guitar?
Never. And don't ask me how I know you shouldn't do that.
By the way, everybody, I have a link to those on the Amazon store page in the finishing supplies thing. If you're interested in the exact cups, it looks like Doug and I use the same cups.
Yes.
But you can get cups that are not solvent friendly, and they'll just melt out from underneath you if you're not careful. So
yeah, you need, I guess, what are they, propylene or something like that?
Something like that.
So I also will put something nearby, and I'll do this not on the guitar, but on the bench or something close by, for the case of the fact that we are so close up on the guitar.
Doug, is it possible to bring that wide shot in a little further?
This one?
Yeah, if it isn't, it's fine.
I think I can. Move.
Oh, it's nice. Yeah, just tilt that down a little bit. We should be golden. All right, we're in business, people.
There we go. So I will keep something nearby that if I need to tap off my toothpick, I'll do that. So if I think it's too wet, and I'll tap it off here to see if there's too much material on it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll do it on the back of a cup or something, and then I'll get in here and put the material in such a way where it's sitting inside the cup.
Are these the glue loopers that Doug was talking about?
No, these are just plastic toothpicks.
Okay.
My glue looper is over at my other bench. I didn't want to run over there.
Okay.
But so here, it got a little darker. It's not so dark that it's noticeable, but when I look at it from the side view, if I were to take, it's hard to tell from the camera, but when I look at it, from an angle, it's still below the relief of the top. So it's down in that well still, and I put a little bit at a time. Now you need to be careful about using accelerator around super glue, because it'll also activate further applications. If I was looking at a situation with like Justin's situation, I might even work the CA down in there, hit when it's below the surface of the top, hit it with a little bit of accelerator, and it's almost coming to the top of my supposed cup right there.
Mhm.
And then I might hit it with accelerator, and I might leave it alone for a day.
Yeah.
Because once I've done that, even with a little bit of, you know, let me pinch out. You can even see on the top where the accelerator is wet.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's already dry to the touch, and it's still below the surface. I might even leave that for a day so the accelerator really gets a chance to vacate. Because, you know, if we come back now, when it's still on the surface, most accelerators will stay active on a surface for several hours after it's been sprayed. In this case, it's already dry, and I can still feel there's a little bit of a well. If it was the next day, I would come back. That's a little bit too much. Let some come off. And I would try to fill the cup. Now, in this case, it's going off almost immediately because I've got accelerated down there. But that's sufficient for now. And I would try to fill up the cup so it's pretty close to the surrounding surface. It's already hard. And then when I'm sanding, I don't have a whole lot of material I have to take off, which means the surrounding area I don't have to abrade nearly as much, or if at all. We all know about the, here we go. We all know about the razor blade trick, right? Of using a razor blade as a scraper.
I think so.
Okay. My twist to that is I'll grab a dental tool that has the grippers on it for you to be able to hold it. Those are usually in the shape of a circle of some sort. I will take it and I will strike the tip of the razor inside one of those circles. What that does for me, it gives me a smooth side, and it turns my razor blade into a hook so that it'll scrape like a cabinet scraper will. So I have a hook tied into that. A couple of pieces of tape on that.
I might also add to this that sometimes I throw the tape on there, but I also bend the razor blade a little bit too, so that it's got a finer area of attack.
Sure. And I always put the tape on the back where the curved part is. So now I have a one-way scraper that is pointing forward. And this I can ride on, you know, the top anywhere, and it's not going to come into contact with the top. Here, I had a little spot where the accelerator
No, that sounds nice.
Yeah, and if we're going to pinch so we can get closer again, right here. Keep going as far as you can. So there, I barely had to take any off. So the whole idea was that I stayed pretty well in the cup. Okay? Now, this is one of my favorite things to deal with. This is microfinishing film. I don't, a lot of us have been getting into using the Kovacs papers, Toll Cut. Toll Cut's wonderful. Toll Cut is, you know, basically very small pieces of microfinishing film that you can purchase from a few different sources. I like the toe cut. It's got a, you know, the sticky back on it. It's got the PSA on the back of it. This doesn't have any PSA on it. This is what it looks like. You get it in, actually, let me grab. I get it from Tay Tools or Taylor Toolworks, not to be confused with Taylor Guitars. When you get it, they come in, this is a package of 10, I think. 10 sheets. And they are different grits. 10 different sheets. They're all color coded. They are from 3M. This is the PSA stuff. So this has a PSA, pressure sensitive adhesive back. This starts at 60 micron, which is about 250 grit. And it goes all the way up to 0.5 micron or 0.3 micron, which is 60,000 grit. And it's graduated all the way up the chain there. I might start something like this at, you know, 1200 or 1800 grit, because I don't want to take off a lot of material. And if I'm pretty close to the surface of the area where I've scraped, I can start, and that would be, which color here? Now I cut them into strips like this, long strips this way, when I'm doing what we're about to do. That was, yellow is 12 micron. Let's start at 1200 grit. Or 1800. I might even start at 1800 grit. I cut them into strips. I leave them in my finishing room drawer, already ready to go in packets. So I can start at whatever grit I want to, work up my way up, work my way down. I might not always start at the most aggressive grit. I might start here at the 1200 grit. And I want to sand, but I want to sand just in a particular area. I'm going to come back to this camera here.
You want a close up?
No, this is fine. I'm just holding it up for you to see.
Okay.
This is a box I keep in my finishing room. It has a multitude of blocks that I can sand with. Rubber, wood, rubber erasers, different felt, different foam, blocks with wood blocks with felt on them, a variety of different thicknesses, a variety of different sizes, and certainly a variety of different hardnesses. The harder my block when I'm sanding, the more aggressive my paper is going to cut. The softer my block, the more squishy the block is, more pliable it is, the softer it's going to cut, or the least aggressive it's going to cut, the less aggressive it's going to cut. So with something like this, I might, if I come back over here, I might decide to start with, you know, a softer, medium hard block, like a rubber eraser is a great block. The other thing I really like are pencils, because I have a rubber eraser on this side, and I can put a rubber eraser like that on the other side. If we pinch out to come out a little bit, I want to show you how I use this. So I want to start here. That pretty much covers my ding. Come back out a little bit more so you can get it more field view. Pinch out instead of in.
You want me to go solo cam here?
No.
Sometimes it's, if you have fingernails, sometimes it can be hard to do that because it doesn't register the fingernails.
I want to come out. There we go. So what I will do is,
This looks a lot like a micro stroke sander.
so yeah, exactly. So I will press down where I want to sand with an eraser or a
Mhm.
piece of rubber or something, and I will strip sand that area where I'm trying to level off.
Are you getting any like micro abrasions before it, or is it mostly just not contacting if it doesn't have the pressure?
It's not contacting if it doesn't have the pressure.
Okay.
So I'm doing right on that spot. There's actually a little ding right next to it that I probably should have filled too. And doing it in separate.
Oh, you're going cross grain.
If I want to make it level, and I just use my finger to see if I can feel it.
Mhm.
At this point, I really can't feel it altogether that much. So I might switch to a block that's a little squarer and flatter.
Do you think this could be done with regular like 2,000 grit sandpaper or 1,000 grit sandpaper? Do you need the fancy sandpaper to
Well,
prosecute this technique?
I find that the micro finishing film really works well for me because it cleans up as well. I've done this a lot until I discovered micro finishing film. I've done it with regular like 2,000, 1,500, 1,000, 800 regular wet or dry paper. But when you do it with wet or dry paper, you really kind of have to use it wet.
Yeah.
Because with wet or dry paper, it'll load up very quickly, and all of that dust in the paper will cause more scratches that are less fine than the sandpaper or more aggressive than the sandpaper. So you end up putting a lot of scratches in. So this, I have a virtually perfectly flat spot now that I can just go up in grits, and if I use different.
I'm gonna put that on the Amazon. So can this stuff be sourced from Amazon?
Taylor Tool Works has an Amazon site, or it's an Amazon store, I guess. Is that what you call it?
What's the name of the product?
This is 3M variety pack microfinishing film. I can send you the link for them.
Okay.
But I get them. I actually get them from Amazon. I just ordered a bunch of them from Amazon. I think a package of 10 grits at 9 by 11 or whatever it is. It's like 24 bucks. So it's not cheap stuff, but the great thing about microfinishing film is you get to use it and reuse it. Microfinishing film, as opposed to sandpaper, sandpaper, the more you use sandpaper, the grits fall away from the paper and it gets finer. So after you use 1200 grit for a little while, it's no longer 1200 grit, it might be 1800 or 2000 or something finer than 1200, because as the grit falls away from the paper, it gets finer and finer. With microfinishing film, it's a fracturing paper where the grit falls away from the paper, it gets fractured, leaving what's underneath the same grit as what was there. So until it wears out, this will remain whatever it was, 1800 grit. So then I'll go up to the next one. I try to keep them in order so that I don't have to keep looking at the sheet. The only negative part about it is there's no writing on it. So if you forget what brown is, you have to go look it up on the sheet. This is the non-PSA stuff, and I will draw at this point I'm polishing, because I think the brown, where was my sheet? here we go. The brown is 4,500 grit at this point. Then we would be going up to 8,000 grit.
Well, I just added that paper to the Amazon storefront if anybody's looking for that.
You found it?
know, yeah, I know I'm gonna buy it. 3M, 7 sheets, 4 by 1¼ inch by 11 PSA lapping microfinishing fill.
Yeah, that's PSA. That's this stuff, which is really good too. This is the same material.
But sticky.
It's got a sticky back that you can peel off of it. Oh, excuse me, that's this stuff here. And it has a sticky back that you can peel off of it. So I can cut a piece of this off if I wanted to do some traditional sanding. I could say cut a piece of that off, release it from the back, I've got exactly what they sell as the where is it? There we go. This is exactly what they sell as the toll cut stuff. That's microfinishing film. Except I can cut it to whatever size I want.
Yeah.
Then if I wanted to put it on the back of something, like if I wanted to take a piece of rubber here and create a sander that I sanded with traditionally, I could do that. I'm not going to do that with that one because that color is 600 grit, and I've already worked my way up to 8,000 here. So I'm at a pretty fine grit. And the neat thing is I've got a pretty flat surface that I can just keep strip sanding. This strip sanding is my favorite technique for localizing my sanding on a spot. You know,
it looks really, really good. Like I'm a little chagrined that I don't do it this way.
That was, what color was that? Was it pink? That's 8,000 grit. Now I can come up to 14,000 grit. So for touch-up work, especially on something that like poly, like any kind of chemical reactive finish, like on the Taylor stuff, by the time I get, and here to a case in point for Justin's situation, I can come right up close against the bridge and I can sand around that bridge, right around the corners of that, and get a pretty tight fit if I'm working my way up in grits. Here is my 3 micron. They sell, I don't know if you can find it on Amazon, but they sell another product which is the non-PSA, and that's a 10 sheet pack that goes a little bit finer. This right now is at 60 grit. It goes all the way up to 500,000 grit, which I think you'd polish like jewels with.
500,000 grit.
Yeah, right now we're at 60,000 grit. And the faster you pull, the more of a shine I'm putting in there. And I might even switch to, at that point, something a little softer that I can really kind of squish down and leave flat. Because remember, the softer the material, I might even go to felt, the less aggressive the paper cuts. And at this point, like I said, it almost looks like I'm kind of buffing out the area, and I can move this around depending on where I want it to smooth out. And I've got a pretty darn flat surface. You know, very often when you're sanding traditionally, where you're sitting there with a block sanding like this, you wind up with a cup.
Yeah.
That you wind up sanding in, and then you get everything buffed up, and you stand back and look at the guitar, and you see this wave where where all of that sanding took place surrounding your touch-up, where you might have gotten your touch-up really good, but now you've got this kind of dimple in the guitar where everything sinks. This thing allows me to choose how much pressure I want to be pressing down on as well. I'm varying the amount of pressure that I'm putting on the block. Now we're going to go up to the last one, which is 500,000 grit, which I'm personally a little annoyed with the fact that they made 60,000 grit white, and then they made the 500,000 grit off-white. So you have to really kind of pay attention. There probably should be some kind of color coding system that you can do to this.
So you're not gonna use any rubbing compounds on this?
You can. I mean, I normally follow up with some kind of rubbing compound to get it to get to a shine, or I might just go over to the stationary buffer and buff it out.
Yeah.
You know, for our purposes, I'll probably use a little bit of compound rather than taking it over to the buffer. This is something that I would easily go over to the buffer and just buff this out and be done with it. So that's an approach that I would take, like in Justin's circumstance. My polishing compounds that I'm using, I've got the McGuire stuff, which I like. I've pretty much used that most of my career, so I know what to expect from it. When I'm doing French polishing, I'm using my own mixture of pumice stone and rotten stone. I've messed around with using pumice on other types of finishes, lacquers and polys and stuff like that. It's too much work to make that stuff. But a little bit of fine cut cleaner right on there.
Is there anything more relaxing than watching somebody else work?
And just the elbow grease.
So you like to go back and forthy with that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm making long oblong circles, small circles, big circles.
Looks like you're spelling out the word ooh.
And that's the fine cut. I always go to the fine cut first, because if it doesn't do a good enough job of getting rid of scratches for me, I know I can always reverse myself back down the abrasive ladder, going to, medium cut or heavy cut after that.
People in the chat are giving the tip that those glue loopers, you can clean them with a lighter.
Yes.
Which is that's good. That's good news. Maybe that's why I don't use them. Maybe I got them and I was like, oh boy, I ruined these immediately. It's kind of expensive.
Yeah, you clean them, you burn off the glue with a lighter. That's a great tip.
Make sure to do it right next to your face.
Yeah.
With an open can of acetone.
Yeah. That's how you trim your nose hairs too.
So this is swirl remover.
Dan earlier one says you can clean them with acetone too.
So that's kind of the procedure I would go through with something Justin has to deal with there, so I can deal with as a little disturbance to the surrounding area as possible. And with my eyes shut, I don't even feel that. It's pretty flat. And from when I look back at it from different standpoints, it shines up just like the rest of the guitar. So I don't see any scratches or anything like that, It's a little dark, on this one because that one had breached the top, but it doesn't look any different from any of the silk that's nearby it. So that's, how I would go about dealing with that, kind of thing. I would try to use as little material as possible and get away with strip sanding so I can keep that pretty close to flush. So that would get me in and out of that repair without,
That's pretty low drama right there.
yeah, without as much, without having to spray, without having to worry about taking the bridge off. I don't know if we can look at it from this side, but it's right there. You can see the ding next to it, whereas there's still a ding there.
Yeah.
So, but that's pretty flat, So that's my sanding routine for that. Going back to, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, we've been at this for an hour and a half. Should we save some of this for a part 2, or do you want to soldier on?
Well, what we can do is we can talk about this.
I'm kind of curious what the Scotch tape was for the razor blade.
Scotch tape was for the razor blade, yes.
No other applications?
No other applications.
Dang it.
This was, if we got a little sidetracked by talking about Justin's situation, but
No, that's all right.
it ruined my fun because I was going to start the presentation by doing this.
Uh-huh.
Because I wanted to be able to make some dings.
Uh-huh. It's very hard to make a inorganic ding, isn't it? Like
it is.
Was that only one hammer?
That was only one.
Yeah, bring the double hammer to it, Doug. Let's see how that works.
So here's this. My my whole approach to doing dings, as we had said earlier, and if you want, you can go right to the camera on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, the Doug Tunit. There we go. So my whole approach to dealing with dings is to try to have as much of an arsenal available to deal with different circumstances. We had a number of dings we could go through, but I don't think we'll go through the actual doing of them, more so than to talk about all of this stuff. We talked about the microfinishing film. That's my favorite paper for dealing with finishes. It gets me in and off of finishes pretty quickly, depending on where I wanted to start. So if I'm starting at like 1200 grit, I can go back down from there to 1000 or 800 grit if it's not being aggressive enough, or I can go back up the ladder to finer. We talked about Blue Boost and Star Bond, which I like Star Bond because it's thinner than Glue Boost, so it helps me get in crevices a lot better, and I can color it. One of the other things I wanted to talk about very quickly is sometimes the type of material I'm going to use depends on what I'm putting it on. So it helps much more to know what you have for a finish before you're putting it on. This, as we talked about, is poly. I can pretty much guess it's going to be some kind of poly because it's a cheap guitar. But very often you don't know whether you have lacquer, whether or not you have poly, or whether or not you have shellac. I don't know if we probably all know this, but acetone is your magic elixir for figuring out what kind of finish you have. If you have a poly finish, whether it be acrylic lacquer, which is really more like a poly, or a polyurethane, polyethylene, a cured finish like Taylor Guitars' finish, Even some of the newer Martins are coming poly, especially the ones made out of Mexico, which I discovered just this way. And I take some acetone and rub it on a poly finish. It won't do a damn thing to the finish. It'll just evaporate right off. It won't mark it at all. If I have a guitar that has a lacquer finish, and if I did the same thing, if I took, and I'm not gonna, this is a customer's guitar, so I'm not gonna wipe it on the face, but if I wiped it somewhere that was inconspicuous, maybe on the edge here, or underneath the pick guard where it's finished, in this case it is, you can see that on the edge, it took off some finish, and it even took off some of the binding, so it went right through the finish. I can then brush some lacquer on there and rebuff it. So now I know I'm dealing with a lacquered finish because it eats right through the finish just with a simple stroke. If I did it over here and then rub my finger there, I could feel the gumminess of the finish, you know, being eaten by the acetone. And that tells me that I've got a lacquer finish. If I have a guitar that has a shellac finish, there's a shellac guitar there. If I took this and wiped it on a shellac finish, it won't hurt the finish. It won't eat through it like it does with lacquer, but it just gave me this really cloudy spot that then I would either have to French polish out or buff out or use a little bit of plastic polish, but it doesn't actually eat the finish. It creates, let me see if I can show it to you, if I can get close. So knowing what kind of finish you have is a really good way to deal with that. Let me try it.
Doug, what kind of guitar is that that's a shellac finish on that?
This is actually, this is Aaron Wald's first art
okay.
that he did. So here, if I do this and put that on there, I don't know if you can see. Well, maybe you can. Can you see it there? How it got dull right in
Yes.
there? You know, you can see that area got dull. It didn't eat through the finish, but it gave me some dull spots that now I would have to polish out either with, you know, French polishing process, or I could use a little bit of, you know, plastic polish.
Novus.
Novus, this stuff is good too, I like. If I took just a little bit of that, and just put it on paper towel, that'll polish right out with a little bit of elbow grease.
Anybody wondering, our Amazon store has bottles of elbow grease for sale.
So, you know, that
Thank
kind
you
of,
for laughing at that, Doug.
so you would have, you know, a pretty quick way of being able to tell what finish it is you're dealing with. Like I said, it's the kind of thing where I prefer to know what I have before I start working on the ding, partially just because if I got a lacquer guitar, I want to work on it with lacquer because that's going to give me the best bite, it's going to give me the best melt in and my best results. It's certainly not going to give me my quickest results because there are going to be multiple applications. But going back to this crash dummy here, if I have the luxury of working with lacquer, I'll work with lacquer. Here we have, I don't know if you can see it. This was the one we were just working on. In this area, we had 3 hammer blows that, there we go. Can you see it there better? Yeah.
Looks like 4 hammer blows.
Yeah, this one was 4 hammer blows. This one was for demonstrative purposes. This is shellac. This is lacquer. This is fill and finish. This is Starbond. And I put them here this way because when you're scraping them, I wanted to be able to demonstrate the difference of what you're dealing with each. Shellac is a terrible material to try to fill a bin with. There's way too much in the way of solvent in it for you ever get to a point where it's filled up. And it scrapes nice, but you can still see right there how there's still a huge cavity there that it would take a few weeks to try to fill that sucker up. Let me get a razor that's not vibrating. For me, I'm just quickly preparing another razor. Give myself the curved edge. So here, when I scrape lacquer, it's the friendliest for me to scrape. I don't know if there we go. It's scraping nice and clean. We'll go this way. And I can feel it cutting super nicely to come over the top of it. It's my favorite material to try to fill a ding with. Certainly if I'm dealing with a lacquered instrument, that's always going to be my choice because it's going to be the most cooperative. It's going to be give me the best melt in. Fill and finish. It's got similar qualities to lacquer, but you can hear that snap at the end of it. I'm coming off the back end of it and it's chipping to a hard edge over here. My lacquer is much cleaner on the back edge of it. So I find with fill and finish, I have to come from lots of different directions, be a little bit more dainty with it. This is Starbond. It's got similar properties to the fill and finish. It's not as rubbery. It doesn't have any butyl in it, so it's a lot harder and a little bit more crystal. And when I'm doing this, I don't know if you can hear it through the zoom, but this has a very high pitch to me. I can hear a little bit of a squeak. It's getting a little flatter, so I can't, it's going away. Fill and finish feels a little bit more rubbery to me. Lacquer, I can feel that just peeling the top of that off. It's much more friendly to the scraping process. Certainly if I was dealing with a lacquer finish, I would want to be doing this with lacquer. Since it's poly, I might wind up doing it with, I might wind up choosing fill and finish a little more often because I want it to stick well. When I am doing a ding in a guitar that I want to get rid of, that's here, I'll always, on the poly finish, I'll scrape the bottom of that ding to give my fill and finish something to purchase on. Sometimes you wind up with too shiny a surface at the bottom where you put your glue in, and then you go to scrape it off, and the glue winds up just popping out because this is too shiny underneath. So I'll do that before I put in whatever fill and finish I'm going to use. Another trick in my little arsenal here, if we're going back to my arsenal, outside of having lots of blocks to choose from, erasers and the like, is dealing with what finish I have. Lacquer, that's clear nitro. In the case of that, that is Deft. That's a great finish for doing drop fills. You can use whatever nitro you're typically using.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Deft is a brushing lacquer.
Is it like higher solid than a lot of lacquers?
It's higher solid, and it has in it, as its solvent base, let me see where I just read this. So it obviously contains the nitrocellulose isobutyl, so it contains some butyl in it, like most nitrocellulose as well. Butoxanethanol. And this is a nitrocellulose. It's a cellulose nitrate. It's got a bunch of different, it's got xylene and all the other ethylbenzene and all these other solvents to it. I think it's probably a less solvent base than a spraying lacquer, obviously, because you're not worried about getting it through a gun. And the flow out, I think probably because of the high butyl content, is a little bit slower. It takes a little bit longer to dry. That's why it's a brushing lacquer. And I just find it a really good lacquer to fill dents with. A couple of things we do with it are, we use it straight, of course. It'll take color. I keep a few colors handy. This is like a cherry red. I mix a bunch of colors, tobacco brown, like a faded yellow for binding and stuff like that. I have kind of a yellow amber, that kind of thing. And I like to keep a few cans of mixed color that I can quickly get to for certain common colors, NSG or what have you. And, the faded yellows and those kind of things. A couple of other things that we do with it is this. This is, where are we? Here we go. This is, I forget what, this is what old timers used to do at their bench. When I know I'm going to have some touch-up work to do, I will fill this up almost to the top, probably about all the way up to here, and I'll leave this open on my bench.
Yep.
This and this are the same thing. I just actually poured some off of here into here and filled it up to about 2/3 the way up. And you leave it open on your bench, and you can see how thick that becomes, almost like molasses. Lacquer, typically speaking, even brushing lacquers, are about 80% solvent and 20% 20% lacquer, 20% solids. So if you can get that to go off at your bench just by putting a cup of it open till it gets to the consistency you want, then drop filling, and I'm going to do it just with the other end of a Q-tip just to show you how sticky it is. It's like molasses, where it really hangs on to, and I might even let this go for a couple more days to get it really kind of sticky. This reminds me of a product that LMI used to sell back in the good old days called, they call it Transfill, which is they sold it to guitar builders to be able to use this in dings and dents on your unfinished top. So you could do repairs and then spray over them. They would be less conspicuous. But this is my version of that. It gets super goopy, and it's a great way to be able to come over here. So that's the ding I just put in there. It's a great way to just get a lot of finish in a small area very quickly. And when I come back tomorrow, after that's evaporated off, it'll still be fairly bulbous. The one we were looking at over here that took a lot of scraping, I only had 1, maybe 2 applications of the lacquer before it got as filled as it was. In fact, that was a mound. If you try to fill that with heavily thin lacquer, even deft right out of the can, you'll have to come back 4, 5, 6, 7 times to get that cup to fill. With this, it's pretty goopy. It's not even coming off my toothpick, the end of my Q-tip there. I wouldn't typically do what I just did, which is try to fill it with a Q-tip. I'd prefer something a little bit more precision, a plastic toothpick or a brush or something like that. But that's another good trick. You always work when you're trying to fill. You try to fill with something that's gone off quite a bit at the bench, and then when it gets to the consistency you want, you can cap it. Keep an eye on it. If it gets a little bit too hard, just add a drop or 2 of thinner to get it back to the consistency you want. And you could be using the same lacquer for drop fills for months. Another thing, if we come back over here, is this. This is another secret weapon. This is nitro, but it's got a beautiful amber color that gets me very often to the right color on older guitars that are darkened. This is artificially darkened, but not with what you would expect, not with any kind of dyes. This is darkened in here. I don't know if you can see through that. There you go. Can you see through that?
Yep.
See all that shit that's at the bottom of that?
What do you got down there?
I'm going to show you. Sludge. See if I can find it. Here we go. Oh, I had it.
George is saying we still use hard lacquer for simple dent fills. We leave the nitro bottle open. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Of course.
There we go. Oh, see, now I'm mixing it up in there. There we go. This is like a game at the carnival. Here we are. Can you see what that is?
What is that? Is it a pellet?
Nope, that's a rusty screw.
Uh-huh.
There is a huge amount of, there's about 2 or 3 screws dissolving, rusty screws dissolving at the bottom of this. that give it its color. It's a great way for it takes a little bit of investment in time, not as much as keeping a jar of lacquer in the sun
Uh-huh.
for 10 years, but you can see at the bottom of that all of that sediment is down there. What I'll typically do is I'll leave the sediment down there over years. This will continue to darken. Let me leave it there. And let me see here. What I'll do is there's a bunch of rust floating around in there, but I'll pull it out and I'll move it to another bottle, and that'll give me a nice color to work with. And the longer I keep that stuff in there, the darker it becomes. You can see that this and this, and this one's a little darker than this one, and that'll just keep getting darker and darker and darker over time. This was stuff that I pulled out of there and just got to another jar. You know, sometimes you have this is filtered, so it doesn't have any pieces of.
How close do you think that is to the oxidation that would happen from UV exposure? That's got to be pretty similar process, right? Or not a similar process, but a similar.
It's very similar. You want to grab the Martin from the front counter?
So anyway, George goes on to say, Transfill was made by Mohawk and is no longer available. It was a hybrid nitro acrylic component.
Was it really? Okay.
And maintained a minimal shrinkage. I wish they'd start making it again.
I used to use it all the time, and when it stopped making it, I switched to doing this like old timers did. Carlo Greco used to leave a big can of lacquer open on his bench all the time with a brush just sticking out of it.
Yeah.
I could tell you a story about that, but I won't.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day.
But this here is let me use the filtered stuff. This stuff I'll typically put through a coffee filter just to make sure that there isn't any rust floating around in it, that I don't want a little speck of something. Can you come down to there? So this finish, you know, it's an older finish. It's about I think it's 1970, this guitar.
Oh, there it is.
Can you see that? Here, hold on a second, so you don't have to hold that. Yeah, let's do this.
You're gonna go up higher.
Yeah. There we go. So that, can you see that that scrape there?
Yes.
That's another scrape that the customer asked us to get rid of. Go from back here so that the light's not shining on it. So here, I'll use my color to, I'll typically do this with a brush. That's a pretty decent match to my orange next to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting a little dark. I might pull some of that out, and I might actually do.
How does this work for like binding repairs where you got to re-amber some binding?
Delightful.
Yeah.
Let me pull some of that out. I might pull some of that with a blade to get it a little whiter again, and then seal it first before I put any of the darker amber stuff on there, because it's soaking a little bit into the wood. I'm gonna pull that out. Like that. Lighten it up a bit. That's looking a lot closer. So that, that's how I might sneak up on that color by pulling some of it out. It got a little dark. But if we look here, just on a, I say on the pickguard area of the guitar,
Or
yeah. You can see the color match I get.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So it's a nice amber color. If we were looking at something that's a white binding, do I have anything that's white here? Oh, here. I'll just use this just for, because that doesn't have, does that have binding on it? Here, this is just a light colored neck. It's subtle on white. If I put it on something white, we'll be able to tell. Oh, here we go. It gets that dull yellow,
Yeah.
that dull amber. That's kind of like it's not orange, it's not yellow.
And also very difficult to replicate with dyes. It never looks
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I wind up doing a lot with dyes and pigments to try to take the edge off the dyes.
Yeah, I think here's where it would actually, let me use one of these.
Very nice.
You can see that's what it would look like, in terms of that color that's not yellow, not amber, not orange, kind of like a grayish brown. But that's the only thing that's colored this lacquer is rust. So it's got kind of an aged look to it,
Mhm.
right off the bat. It's hard to tell here, but you can see, with the right light, you can see that orangey kind of
Mhm.
look to it. I don't have a guitar here with white binding exposed, but that's exactly what it looks like when you're brushing it on. And when you're getting it, you put it on the layers, let it dry, and if you need to put it on a little darker, you let it dry and you put it on again. So that,
Awesome.
I don't remember where I stumbled across that, but that's
Jeff Jewett sent me a long time ago, like a bunch of what he called iron oxide dyes.
mhm.
Or yeah, I think they were dyes, but somehow he figured out how to get yellow and red out of that. But I'm
Well,
guessing yellow must have been really light and red must have been really dark.
yeah, I think I may have. I don't remember exactly where I first kind of got. I may have had some can of something or other that was not lacquer. I opened up the can and the can had rusted on the inside. I think that was where I got the idea of taking something that was rusty and dropping it in, just in a jar of lacquer. And over time, that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I use that all the time. I keep a bottle of it constantly percolating in the finishing room. That rust just sits at the bottom of that. In fact, if we do this, let me pour this stuff back in there because I'm not using that. But if I take this, I don't know if you can see it from that angle. There we go. There we are. You can see if I disturb that. All of that rust at the bottom of that. Maybe if I just cap it and turn it upside down, maybe I'll do that. So there, if I do that, there it is. There's all the rust. There it goes. So that's just sitting there. It's just solid, sitting at the bottom of and it's just goopy mess down there. And I let it settle to the bottom, and then I'll grab a pipette and pull some of it out. That's a great way to come up with, the right kind of oxidization
Yeah.
in your finish.
We should probably wrap it up here pretty soon just because
Yeah.
it's been 2 hours and people are dropping like flies. Everybody's like, I gotta go do stuff.
Okay, why don't we leave it there?
That was really good though. I learned a lot on that. I'm gonna get some of that paper for sure. I've I've suffered through all that flat blocking nonsense and sticking my tongue out and trying really hard. That looked a lot easier.
Sure. These we might want to get for your Amazon thing as well. These are wonderful. These are like little micro brushes that you've seen.
Bob, if you go onto theluthgroup.com, there's a link to our Amazon page, and I just put those up on there, or you can see if Doug will hand you that link. But yeah. All right.
All right.
Everybody that is still standing, if you could unmute and deliver a warm thank you to Doug, because there's a lot of really good stuff in there.
Thanks,
Bravo, Doug.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Thank you,
solid
Doug.
fall weekend, guys. Awesome.
All
Thank you,
right.
Doug.
You
Thanks
guys
so much,
have a good
Doug.
rest
Thanks,
of your-
Doug. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, get a tetanus shot, Doug.
Now we have two Ding Kings.
It's growing by the day, Dan.